Unlikely that people like Bill would have mined harbors in Central America or helped write assassination manuals for the CIA. It is also unlikely that Bill and others like him would have condoned Iran-Contragate. And Bill certainly would have never participated in the shredding of classified documents or tried to excuse those who lied to Congress. Maybe our military is experiencing a karmic justice. It's just too bad that our nation is being jeopardized in the process. There is much to be learned from the lessons of May 4th, 1970. In the May of 1969, Bill Schroeder wrote a poem to his mother, and within it, he expresses the wisdom of learning from one's own mistakes. The growth of a sudden empathy, perhaps brought on by the gaining of years, the birth of a newborn sympathy for a mother's sorrows and fears. Raising a son who was always attacking what you felt was needed regulation, now I see it was I who was lacking, ignoring the most sincere supplication. Days gone by shall never return, despite the most reverent of prayers. It is not all in vain. I shall certainly learn from my previous conflicts and errors. Learning from the past is of prime consideration. Your many influences shall linger and last, to be passed on through me to the next generation. While we cannot bring back Bill or Allison or Jeff or Sandy, we can teach others the lessons of May 4th. And it is up to us to pass on their lingering influences to the next generation. Not simply one day a year or an occasional spare evening. We need to devote the whole of our lives to strengthening the ideals of justice and to work for an America free from poverty, free from discrimination and economic violence, and free from the threat of unjust wars. Thank you.
To present Kendra
Davies, an ordinary citizen from Staten Island, New York, who had been appalled at the shootings, and he himself had spent months researching the shootings, looking for clues to explain why the National Guard had fired. Peter described this time to me. For almost a year, we tilted at windmills alone, but without his dynamic strength, I could not have stayed the course. Arthur's quest was never idealistic. He was always a realist in dealing with the Nixon administration, and despite his grief and anger, whenever we accomplished something that seemed to me a big step forward, he would laugh and say, "That and 10 cents will get us a cup of coffee." We had more cups of coffee than I care to remember. Elaine Holstein, the mother of slain Jeff Miller, described Arthur as totally indispensable. She wrote to me, "Indispensable because my life in those years after our children were killed and we struggled to find some semblance of justice would have been more hellish without the Rock of Gibraltar that was Art Krause." In 1971, Arthur and Peter were joined by the Reverend John Adams of the United Methodist Church. This addition to the team had a very positive effect. As Sanford J. Rosen, attorney for the families in the final settlement, observes, two people, Arthur Krause and John Adams, are the most responsible for the measure of justice that Kent State victims and their families have received. Arthur brought anger and passion to the case. John brought hope and compassion. Without these two, all would have been for naught. Arthur's passion was so prevalent due to the fact that he knew what lay at the root of the problem. As he recalled his life, he said, "I was like everyone else, and then this happened to us." In recalling other episodes of extreme violence in our country before May 4th, 1970, he said, "I feel a great sense of guilt because I realized what was going on, but I didn't do a damn thing about it. Like most Americans these days, we sit on the fence and depend on the lawyer, the church, and the government to do whatever should be done. But if the government doesn't have the right people in the job, nothing will be done. And we, the people, have to make the government good. Apathy will not be a part of my makeup anymore. Apathy is what caused Kent's state. In 1975, Arthur's 4 years of persistence paid off. The victim's family were given their day in court. Vindication should have been forthcoming. It was not. Elaine Holstein recounts, "It turned out to be many, many days, some of the most painful days in my life. As we sat in the courtroom and heard our lovely children vilified by the defendants and their lawyers, I find myself increasingly seeking out Art, to become healed by his unshakable determination and common sense, and, most importantly, his humor. Even under the horrendous circumstances that brought us together, Art's brilliant and sometimes bitter wit would break the tension and lift the oppressive burden we all carried, and we would feel the blessed relief of laughter that enabled all of us to survive those terrible months." When the verdict was announced in favor of the National Guardsmen, it was Arthur that announced that the trial proved that the Constitution had been destroyed. While the families waited during the